Hello and welcome back to this Scriptcase training video. My name is Jamie Oates and I'm your host today. Today we are creating a hotel check-in, check-out system within Scriptcase. Now we have started and we're already about an hour into the project and we have already created a few applications here. So let's have a quick look at those as a brief reminder. So we created a folder structure. We've had a look at the database and the data and fields that we are using for this project. And we have also already created the following applications that you're seeing here now. So we've created these forms as well as these grids. Now the last form and grid we created was here for the rooms. So a quick look at that one. We created here the grid for rooms and also the form and linked the two applications together. Now I did leave you with this room form and I did say that I wasn't really going to continue with this, but I really hate the look of it. So let's go ahead and start off by continuing where we left off from and actually style this form a little more than we had left it. Okay, so if I just run the form quickly as it is without the grid, so we have no back button, and we have the grid as it is. Let's go ahead and make some further changes to this. So the first thing I'm going to do is come here to the layout blocks and I'm going to create another block. Okay, I will set here the label to above on both of them and the width on the first one I'll set to 60, the next one to 40, and let's select next beside on the first block, and here I will also go no on both of these, and let's leave the titles and then come here to edit fields, and then we can position our fields into these blocks. So let me first of all hide the room ID. We have the room number, the room type, the room name, the room description. So let's then place here the guest count, the availability, and also the price. Now if I run that now, we will have a slightly better layout than what we have now. And just really quickly with a few simple little changes. Now I would possibly change here the room type. So we have here 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Let's just add 5, 6 columns there. So I come into fields, room type, and then here we can add here, say 6 columns. If I run that now, the room type will then also be displayed as so. And let's move the picture also. So let's actually go ahead and create another page. In fact, let's not use a page and just use another block. So a block, and I'm going to call this block 2. Create that. And now this one here would be a tab. No. And then here, if I go to edit fields, I can move the picture to this block and run that again. And what we will have now is pictures below. So I didn't add the labels, and we actually need to change that slightly here. So here, labels, pictures. Let's add the next one here, tabs, and this one, next one. If we add another one, we would have that as tabs as well. So here, let's add the room information, room info, and what do we have there? Availability. And just let's call that one details. And we then display the labels. Let's run that. And then we now have the picture and details here in a tab next to this. So we want to change here the layout here as well, from above, beside to above. In fact, we can actually hide this label, run that again, and now we have the picture. Yeah, okay. So that's a slightly different layout. Of course, we could play with that, place them all in tabs, or have any other slightly layout that you please. So I'm going to leave it like that for now. For the guests, I think here we should change this and add maybe a select in here, and then add some manual values in here. 1, 1, 2, 2 and 2, 3 and 3, 4 and 4, 5 and 5. Okay, so we have then maximum 5 people in a room, and that makes that then a little nicer to select and easier to use. Okay, so then let's go ahead, and we have here then also the public price. So for public price, we could change this to a decimal field or a currency field, if you please. So depending on how you're using your project, I'll change it here to a currency field, and then we can show a calculator if we wanted to. I don't think there's any need, and we have there the option to display here the currency symbol, which is exactly what I wanted. So display currency symbol, run that again, and we then have next to the public price the currency symbol displayed. Okay, so then now do note that the currency symbol depends on the local language that you're using. So of course for the project we've selected UK English, so this would only display pounds. If you then have different languages, it should then update the currency accordingly, and then you would have to define your own values. Okay, so continuing on, the most important part of this project was then next up the reservations. Now the reservations is a 4 to 5 step process. Now I say 5 step, it is actually 4 step, and we're going to have to create those applications now one at a time. So we will start first of all with step 1, and step 1 we will create a grid, and this one I will call it customer reservations, and enter here the SQL statement. And if I expand that, we can see here that we have, again, we're combining the customers table, the countries table, and the country document table. Okay, so that we always have those relations there, and then we have then the customer ID, customer document number, name, birth date, gender, phone number 1 and 2, the address, the pictures of the documents, the email address, the country, and the documents, and so forth. So let's go ahead then and go create. And we can then also run that, and we then have here our initial grid. Okay, so what we want to do then is add an option here. So these are then customers that have then created a booking. So we need an option here to actually create one of these customer entries first of all. So what we then do is we'll create a new form. Sorry, look. So I come here and then create a form, and we've got a new application and form, and here I'll select the table customer reservations, for which we actually want to select the customers table. Okay, so we selected the customers table. Now I'm going to change here the title to form customers reservations and create that. Okay, so now with our customer reservations here, if I come here to application links, and then if I go create, in fact we don't want to create a new link here, we want to create a new field. So I come here, new field, go next, and this is then going to be the reservation field, reserve, so it's quite reserve, create, and then here we're going to use a HTML image, and we're going to select one of the images we had added previously, so project, icons, and my images are not here currently. Did I add them in another folder? Okay, so with our icons displayed, I'm going to select here the bell signature and add selected. If I run then the grid, we're going to have a new field here with the reservation option. So I still need to add the button, which is then going to open. the customer reservation. So let's come here then. We need to add the application link to access that. So I'll create here a new link, edit link, and that comes here to the form TB customer reservations we just created. So I'm jumped around a little bit there. So we have here the ID customer, confirm that. And now we have open the same window. There we can do that, save, and then run. And now this will then open the form we've just created. Just don't need to generate. Which then allows us to add our customer information. Okay, so if I come here then back to the grid and then go that way. So report, add new, and then we can add our customer information here. So I go cancel, and here we want to first of all change our fields. So we need to create another application at the moment. Let's first of all edit this application here because this isn't looking very nice. So at least this process is complete also before we continue on. So we need to make adjustments here to this form. Let's go first of all to the settings, top alignment, width 100%. We can adjust the fields that we want displayed here. So come to field positioning, it's easier. So I'll remove the ID, not needing that. I don't need the front and back picture either. The phone number too, well, we can leave that. Country and document, I'll move them up and move the document number down. Okay, so custom email, go up and then run that, and we have a slightly nicer positioning on our form. Okay, so we need to change here the date here also, and apply here for the fields, the country. Okay, so I come here then to fields first of all, and then we have the country doc, and here we want to apply the same SQL we had used previously. So paste that in there. So ID country doc, document type from country document, where ID country equals the country ID field value, and we can use a title here, select use the connection, save that, and then access the country ID. Okay, so for country ID, we use the default select here, country. I'll choose the connection, I'll use a title, I will save that, and then below here I will use Ajax to refresh the ID country. So I'll switch that on, save it again, and then we can run the application, and we now have our country fields. Did I do something wrong there? Run. Okay. Okay, so we just need to adjust here the field here, and maybe for the gender, place in a radio option. So gender, if I change that to radio, and then manual, female, F, male, M, and so forth. So if I then run that, we have a little nicer option there. For the gender, we still need to adjust here the field, and let's actually add that into a second column. So again, if I scroll down here, I'll place the 2 columns, and we also want to change here the birth date, so it's displayed below, then run, and then now we have a nicer layout for our application. And as previously, we could of course go out and go further and extend that some more. So back to our customer reservations grid. If I now run here, now opening the form will present us that much nicer form. So we'll go add new. Yeah, okay. So now within that form, we actually want to now add an event so that it returns back to the customer reservations. Okay, so I'll come here to events on after insert. So on the form, that is, events, on after insert. And then here we paste the following event. So here we are committing the transaction, and then we are going to redirect the user back to this grid. Okay, so if we save that. Okay, so now here within the grid application, if I then run here, we have, well, not really much has changed from the current status, but now what we have here is the edit field. So we actually want to remove these, and that was actually on the application link. So this is actually an option here. So if I come back here and go to properties and scroll down, we want to disable the option to delete and update and save. And now if I run the grid again, we'll no longer have the edit options here, but we'll have the add new. Okay, so then we already have our first process ready. So when we come in here, we can add our customer name, add all the details, and then they would be listed here as they are, like so. Okay, and then we want to add here the reservation option so that the customer can go through and book a position. Of course, there is further styling on this grid that you may want to apply, like we have done with the other ones. Please go ahead and do that. But for the continuation of this project, we're not going to be continuing with that now. Okay, so our next step, if I change here, if I actually add here into the description, so we don't forget here, we have here the customer reservations. Now this is step 1, okay? And then we have here for the customer reservations, this is basically the booking edition, okay? So basically we're adding the customer. So this isn't really classed as a step here. So then if we then create our new application, and this time we're going to create a control application. And here within the control, let's call this control booking. We have it there already. And create. And here we're going to select to create 5 fields. So I come here to fields, go new field, and select 5. I'll enter 5 as the quantity. And the first field we want is the customer. The next field we want is the entry date. Then we want the entry time. Then we want the exit date. And then also the exit time. So there we go, exit time. And then we can actually, well, let's select here the values. So we have here the time field. This would then be a date field, a time field, a date field, and the customer would be a select. Okay, so these fields will then, data types for these fields will automatically be created. I'm going to leave the labels as they are. Again, you can of course go ahead and customize and add them as you please. Okay, so now we have our fields. So let's start off first of all with the customer select. So here we want to add a select in here. So we come down here to automatic, and I'm just going to paste here the select I'm using, which is then the customer ID, customer name from customers, where ID customer equals var ID customer. Okay, so that's going to be a variable being the ID. Okay, so we're going to pass that along as we progress. So let's come then next up here to the entry date. And before I do that, actually choose here the connection and use title. Okay, so entry date, selecting the entry date, we can just use this as simply the check-in time. Check-in time. Date actually. And we can make changes here to the date values if you wanted to. We can display a calendar, the full date formats and so forth. I'm going to leave them as they are for the time being. We also have the entry time. Entry time. Again, for the time, the exit date. And also again, the exit time. So the data types are already selected. So unless you want to make some further customizations to the values that we have available, or the time format, displaying a time picker, a date picker, you can actually make those changes there. So I go ahead and run this control form. We are requested for the customer ID initially as indicated within the application, and there I'll just select 1, and there I have the customer values. So I believe we start at customer 10. So let me enter 10. No, okay, so let me double check that here within the database. We have here the so tables, we have here the check-in. We don't have any checked-ins yet. We have reservations. So table reservations, ID reservation 10, and then the customer ID 5. Okay, so come back here again, run, and then if I enter this time the ID 5, we then receive the relevant customer details. So let's remove there the title, this title, run that again. So if I go with 8, you have then the customer, and then we can specify the check-in date, time. So maybe we'll actually want to add the calendars to the date fields. Let's quickly do that. We have here display calendar option, and then we can specify how we want to change this calendar. So here, for instance, we can change the year limits to 4 years, and let's display position below, and then let's do the same for the exit date. So we're going to display first of all below, and display the calendar, and change that to 4 years. Okay, so if I run that again, and I say ID 8, we now have our calendar entry here with a maximum of 4 years. Okay, so we could do the same for the time. I think I'm just going to leave them as they are, hours, minutes, seconds. It's always quite an easy one to do. We could maybe change it just to hours, minutes actually. So let's do that. Display hours, minutes, and exit time. Also, we just want to display hours and minutes. We don't need the seconds. That's too much. And we have then our booking nearly ready. Okay, so we can change here the position also for the time format to below. So let's do that for the 2 fields, so that they match up with the dates. And then run. Now the format will be displayed below those fields. And okay, so we can actually extend the form, maybe make it larger. Let's go ahead and actually do that. Let's come here to the block, move the label to above, and here then within the form settings, let's set the table width to pixels and say 800 pixels. Run that, and then we can have here now our form. Or alternatively, we could actually go ahead and use some of the new features. So let's use here again the input width to 100. Now the vertical alignment, I'm going to set that to center. Okay, and let's go ahead and actually change this a little smaller. It's not needed so large, so 500 pixels is plenty. And now we will have, as you see, slightly different form. It will also be centered within the viewport with the new value we just selected here, vertical alignment, center, and that centers the form then within the center of our viewport. Okay, so this form is not far from done. We could go ahead and make some changes here. So let's actually change one option. I really like to have our buttons indicate what they are actually meaning. So okay, let's move this over to here, and we can actually get rid of those because we need to create a new button. So let's remove those 2 buttons. Okay, and we're going to come down here to buttons, go new button, and we're going to call this button continue. We then give it a type of PHP, create. Okay, and then what we want to do then is take our fields. Well, let's customize this first of all here. So let's use a pointing hand. And let's go to the right. We can change the styling, say PayPal styling, and let's just capitalize our button here. Continue. Okay, so we can add a confirmation message if we wanted. There's really no need. And what we want to do then is capture our fields. So we have here first of all our entry time, our entry date, our exit date, and exit time fields within these field variables defined here. And here we have our own variables, which we are then taking, and which we are then going to pass on for our redirection, which is then next up. So for the redirection, we are going to redirect to a form TB reservations, which is going to be the next form we are going to create. Okay, so within that form, we will capture the entry date, the entry time, the exit date, and also the exit time via the indicated variables, and be able to then capture that data and process it within the next application. So now if I come back up here to toolbar now, I can then move here to continue, place it down here at the bottom. Let's place that in there, run that, and now we have our form that much further. Okay, so now we have our continue button there, and everything else is all good. Okay, so then our next form is then the form reservations, as I had just mentioned. Okay, so I close that form, and let's go new application. So the next application we create is then the form reservations, which is then the next step in this process. So here we want to select first of all the table, and here we want table reservations. Here we go. And here I'm going to leave the name as it is. Let's go create. And run the form. Okay, so this is the form as it is. Let's go ahead and make some adjustments to the layout and make it look nice for the rest of this process. So starting then with the settings, vertical alignment and the width, and 100% for the table width. Let's run that again. And we have our initial styling and layout there. So let's change then also here for the layout blocks, put the position above. And we have here a couple of fields I saw for dates. Let's go ahead and make those adjustments to those straight away. So we have here the arrival date. Let's set the limit again to 4 years. Place the position below. And again also for the arrival time. Here we want hours and minutes only. And we can display the position below again. And this time for the checkout date. So here, change the years to 4, display the position below, and also for the checkout time. And for the checkout time, hours and minutes below, and let's go ahead and run that. Okay, so we have here now the initial layout. We have here the system date time. We need to adjust this one still. Here the customer field and also the stage field. So let's go ahead and change those also. So for the system date time, we can have like so, removing the seconds, display below, and let's leave that as it is then. Now for the ID customer, we want to have a select field. And here we are going to use the following select statement, selecting the customer ID and the customer name from the customer table, where the customer ID equal again the var ID customer. Okay, and then we also have the ID stage. Now for the stage, we can also use a select here. and we can actually just leave it as a select. And here we're going to use the following lookup methods. So ID stage, description from stages where ID stage is 1 and 2. So if I run that now and select the customer ID 8, we have then some details here already. Okay, so the next thing we want to do here is actually apply some many-to-many relationships. So we need to enable here the services as well as the room selections. So let's start off with the room. So if I come here to a new relationship, and for the label, I'll add rooms. Leave the text, the data type as text, and go next. So what did I miss there? So I go here, service rooms. Rooms. Next. Okay. So yes, exactly. Sorry, my bad there. So here basically assigning the field name, which will be then displayed here, and then the label also. Okay, so both of those are required. Okay, so then we have the SQL select statement. Now here we're going to go manually and go next. Now here we are going to use the following statement, and if I expand that, we can see then we have here the room type. We are concatenating the description as well as the guests, the guest availability for the room, and also the public price. Now we are combining that with the rooms table as well as the room types table, okay, where ID room equals ID room type, and we are grouping it via the room type also. So if I go next here, we have the lookup display. So we can leave that as no. The object we want to have as a radio, and we can, let's actually select one column and go next. Now we have our link table. Now here we want to select here the room reservations X customers and go next. And then we have our relationship keys. So here the ID reservation needs to match here the ID reservation. Again, we can go next, and we select now the lookup field. Now the lookup field is the room type. Okay, and next we have then our link attributes, and here for the field we will define that it is calculated by the database. The ID customer equals the ID customer, the arrival date equals arrival date, and checkout date equals checkout date, and the system date time, we can use that date time current. If I go next, we can then specify the general display details and customize how the information is displayed within the form. I'm going to leave that as default and go next and finish. Okay, so if I run that now and enter here 8, we have our form, and we have here now the room information related to our relationship table that we just added. Okay, so the next one we want to add is then the services. So here again, I will add services for the label services and go next. Now here the SQL statement again is manual. Go next, and we then add our SQL statement into the container. So here we are selecting the ID service, concatenating the service name with the rating, the price, and we're actually changing that. So when the offer price equals 0, then we display the public price. Otherwise, we display sale and then the offer price. Okay, and that's then taken from the service table where the ID service is between 1 and 3. Okay, and if we go next, we have then our lookup display. So we can select here how we want this to be selected or used within our application. Now, because this is services, I think a checkbox is best suited here. So I'll use checkbox, and again, I'll use one column. So I'll go next. Now the link table here is the table name services reservation X customers. and next. The relationship keys is here again, the ID reservation. We select the ID reservation and go next again. And then we have the lookup fields. Okay, so now for the lookup field, we select ID service. Go next. We have then our link attributes, which we need to define. And the first one for the service reservation X customer is calculated by the database. ID customer is ID customer. The request date time current. The service employee, we'll leave that as null, 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 and we can have that as null also. And then we go next, because these are actually for the making the request now, and then this would be for the delivery later. So then I'll go next, and we have our general display settings. Again, I'll leave them as default and go next again. We could add some help information here as we can within our fields. So we can display that as a hint, a text, a pop-up, however we please. We just add the text in there, and that would then also be displayed for this field. So now, if I've finished that as I've just done, we have the many-to-many relationship displayed here, and I can now run the form, and then I will now also have the services also displayed within this form application. Okay, so now let's go ahead and make some adjustments to the layout. We have the blocks, so let's create another block. I'll create block 1. So another quick peek at the form. So we can place these room services. And yes, let's go ahead and just do that for the time being. I'll place that as above. And then come here to fields positioning. And then here, rooms and services. I'll move them down into that block and then go run. Okay, so now I need ID 8. Okay, now we have the two blocks. Now we actually want to place them next to each other. So we turn back to blocks again. And then here we select next beside. And again, I'll set the first one as 60% and then 40%, and then run that again. And they will now be sitting next to each other within the form, like so. Okay, so we could make further changes here to how this is displayed, or in the styling. We could add tabs in here and actually hide some of this information if you wanted to, or even change how the ID is passed along and so forth, just with some work within the form. So for the time being, this is how we are going to be working here, and we need to continue on by adding the events within this form. So if you remember in the previous application, if I open that again, come here to home, we had here for step 1, let me add here then also the description again for the control booking, which is actually step 2. So that is the reservation. And here for this form, which is open, I won't be able to edit that now. That would be step 3 for the room service selection. Okay, so we have here within step 2, we are passing on the information here within our button. So come here back to button, continue. We have here our variables which we are passing along. So we need to now configure this form to accept those variables and continue on with this process that we have started to create here. So the first thing we will do is actually on application init, we want to start this application new. So if I go st and it's apl underscore conf, so sc for Scriptcase underscore application underscore configuration. Okay, so then I'm going to add the brackets, and I'll close that already. And then here we then add our variables. So here we have new. Then we have start. So we start the application new, and then we define the application name, which is form underscore tb underscore reservations. Okay, so now if I run that again now, it will start as a new form. Even if I add now here the customer ID, we have a new form added here. So we actually have to specify the information as part of our process. Okay, so then we have the next event, which is our onload event. So now here we want to take our fields. So I will equals field. No, actually, we want to use a global variable here. And then I'm just going to copy that a few times here. And here we then want to define our arrival time. We have then also our arrival date. We have then also our checkout time and date also. Okay, so then we want to add our variables defined here within our control booking. If you remember that we have them here, var entry date, var entry time, var entry exit date, and var exit time. So if I just copy these, and then we can actually just place them in here. var exit time, var exit date. And then the other one was entry time and entry date. So entry time, I can see I've got these mixed around. Okay, and here then the arrival date. Okay, so that's now our variables defined. And then we want to add on validate, we now want to add a query. So here I'm going to copy and paste first of all the reservation. Okay, so here we're going to get the reservation, the last entered reservation ID. And then next up we are going to grab the system time. So the reservation ID, we have it here as a variable. We're going to use that in a moment. We have then also the system time. So then we want to basically take both of these variables and use them for our continuation. So we have then here the reservation ID and here the system date time, which are then going to be added into these fields. So ID reservation will be placed here, and system date time will be placed into this field on validation. Okay, so the next event we have is an on after insert. So on after insert, we now want to basically send an email to the client and notify them that we are reserving a room for them. So we start off by connecting to the database, and you'll notice here we have a custom select, and we are combining here the customs table, the country document, and the countries table. We are then searching via the variable ID of the customer, which we have received on entry of the application, and then we are defining the database entries as variables here. Okay, so then we want to set up our email. So I'm going to copy paste again here the code for the email, and basically we define here first of all our subject, and then we provide our message. Now within the message here, we're basically saying, hello, thank you very much. So here the customer name still needs to be updated. Okay, so hello customer name, and this is entry time, and the checkout date, checkout time, so arrival time, checkout time. Okay, just call it arrival, so arrival time, and then we are providing the registration details, including the customer information. Okay, so then we basically go ahead and send the email, which would then provide the following code, which is like so. Now you're going to see I have it commented here, okay? So it is commented out so that we don't actually send the email, because we need to connect to the mail data, well, our mail server, which I have not set up for this project, as you may have noticed when we started the project. And you'll notice again also when we come later to the security. Okay, so copying the correct section here. So then once we sent our email and collected all this data, we would then want to commit our transaction so that the process completes within the form. And what we then want to also do is possibly display a message to the end user to tell them that we have a message, that it has been processed. Okay, and then we are just going to redirect them to the login page, to the view. So let me come here, and we're going to paste now the redirect, and that will then redirect to the grid VW reservations, which will then provide all the information regarding our entire process. Okay, so if I then close the control booking, if I run the form reservations quickly, we're going to see we have here the variables, so we can actually set those as exits. So I come here to application, global variables, and then here the entry date, entry time, and exit date and time, we set them to out. So then they are not required on run. So if I run that again now, I'll just be required to provide the ID for the customer, reservations, and our form is now complete. Okay, so we can make further changes to the buttons, change the text for the buttons, which I really do like to do. So then if I come here to toolbar, we can quickly change these. So I'll adjust them here over to the right. And then here for the insert, we're going to say continue or complete the registration. Complete the registration. Okay, so if I place that then also in the new and then run. Okay, and then when we run that again now, we will have a button which makes a little more sense. Okay, so we could actually go ahead and customize that a little more, add our own button and so forth. But we want to now continue with the final view. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new application. And this is going to then be a grid application. Okay, and here we have the SQL select we are going to use. And we are basically just selecting the reservations table and presenting the data. So I could basically just come here and select here, view reservations, and then customize the fields accordingly here. Okay, so if I go create and run, we have then our final view. So then on completion of this, the user would then basically see the reservation here processed at the end. And then we can continue with the check-in and checkout process within the next video. So for the continuation of the styling and so on, please view the video previous to this. We have done that pretty much a few times now already. So as mentioned before, I'm not going to continue that now for this application. So I will go ahead and just generate all source code now, and then we will be ready for the next video and the next applications to finalize the videos. So thank you very much for watching part 2 of this Scriptcase training. I hope to see you again soon in part 3.